Carlos Alcaraz is 12-0 in 2026. 30 straight wins on outdoor hard courts. 13 finals in his last 14 tournaments. And when asked about this dominance, about what it's like to be virtually unbeatable right now, he didn't give some humble deflection or downplay his success. He said something that reveals exactly why this winning streak isn't just about tennis. It's about psychology. He acknowledged the mental advantage, the fear, the psychological edge that might be more valuable than any technical superiority. Because once opponents believe you're unbeatable, they've lost before the first point even starts. Let's examine why believing someone is unbeatable is so damaging in competition. Because it's not just about lacking confidence. It's about how that belief affects every decision you make during a match. Every tactical choice. Every shot selection. Every mental calculation in crucial moments. When you face someone you think is unbeatable, you play tentatively. You don't go for the risky shot that might be a winner, because what's the point? They'll get it back anyway. You don't serve and volley because they'll pass you. You don't try the drop shot because their court coverage is too good. Every aggressive option gets filtered through the belief that it won't work, so you end up playing conservative, defensive tennis. And defensive tennis loses to elite players every single time. The self-fulfilling prophecy aspect is also crucial. If you believe someone is unbeatable, you play worse than your actual ability level, which means they beat you more easily, which reinforces your belief that they're unbeatable, which makes you play even worse next time. It's a downward spiral that's incredibly difficult to escape once it takes hold. Alcaraz saying, "It's possible," rather than "definitely," is also psychologically sophisticated. He's not claiming absolute certainty. That would invite pushback and create motivation for rivals to prove him wrong. Instead, he's planting a seed of doubt. Maybe they see me as unbeatable. I can't be sure. But it's possible. That ambiguity is actually more powerful because rivals will now be examining their own feelings. Do I see him as unbeatable? Wait, do I? Is that why I've been playing this way? The number of consecutive wins makes the perception credible. Because it's not like Alcaraz is claiming this psychological edge after winning 3 matches in a row. He's 12-0 in 2026. He's on a 30-match outdoor hard court winning streak that started at Cincinnati in August 2025. He's won 12 finals in his last 13 tournaments. Those aren't normal numbers. Those are dominance numbers that make unbeatable seem like accurate description rather than exaggeration. When Arthur Fils faced Alcaraz in the Doha final, he basically admitted as much afterward. "Right now, it's another level, and I'm not there," Fils said. That's someone who just spent 50 minutes getting demolished, acknowledging the gap feels insurmountable. That's exactly the mindset Alcaraz is talking about. Fils didn't just lose. He internalized the belief that the gap can't be bridged in the near term. The same pattern appeared with other opponents during this streak. Valentin Royer told Alcaraz at the net, "I will come for you and Jannik." Future tense. Not, "I can beat you now, but someday I'll be good enough." That's another player who's basically admitted the current gap is too large. Another opponent operating from the belief that Alcaraz is currently unbeatable. Even top players are showing signs of this psychological disadvantage. Andrei Rublev had 6 match points against Alcaraz in their Doha semi-final and couldn't convert any of them. When you have that many opportunities and can't close, part of it is execution, but part of it is mental. Somewhere in the back of Rublev's mind was probably the thought, "This is Alcaraz. He always finds a way. Can I really beat him?" That doubt, even if subconscious, affects performance on the biggest points. The statistical backing for Alcaraz's dominance makes the psychological edge even more powerful. He's won 85% of points on first serve in some recent matches. That's absurd. When you're facing someone who wins 85% of first serve points, your return opportunities are so limited that each one carries enormous pressure. That pressure compounds the psychological disadvantage because you know you can't afford to waste chances. His 30-match outdoor hard court winning streak puts him in elite historical company. Only a handful of players have ever won 30-plus consecutive matches on any surface. And Alcaraz is doing it on the fastest surface, against the best competition, during an era where the depth of talent is supposedly greater than ever. That streak isn't just impressive. It's historically dominant in ways that make unbeatable feel like accurate assessment. The completeness of his game also contributes to this perception, because there's no obvious weakness to exploit. You can't target his serve. It's elite. You can't target his return. He's one of the best returners on tour. You can't outlast him. His fitness is exceptional. You can't overpower him. He hits as hard as anyone. You can't outthink him. His tactical awareness is sophisticated. When there's no obvious vulnerability, opponents start thinking, how am I supposed to beat this guy? That question, how am I supposed to beat him, is exactly the thought process Alcaraz is describing. When you're asking that question, rather than implementing a game plan with confidence, you've already conceded the psychological high ground. You're looking for answers that might not exist, rather than executing what you do best. The contrast with Jannik Sinner's current situation makes this even more interesting. Because Sinner, who's the only player remotely close to Alcaraz in talent, has openly admitted he's in a small slump. He's lost his last 5 matches to Alcaraz. He's changing his game to try to match Alcaraz's completeness. That's Sinner, world number 2, 4-time Grand Slam champion, one of the most talented players in history, operating from the belief that his natural game isn't enough to beat Alcaraz. That's the psychological edge Alcaraz is talking about, and it's affecting even the very best players. The way Alcaraz talks about his own mindset also reinforces the psychological advantage. If you want to find a solution to a problem, you should find it in a calm place, he explained after the Rublev match. When I am playing and getting mad, seeing I'm not at my best, I just get frustrated. That is not the place you will find solutions. In these matches, I have been really calm, thinking clearly and being positive. That's championship psychology. He's describing the ability to stay composed even when things aren't going well, which is the exact opposite of what most players do under pressure. When opponents see that composure, when they watch him come back from 2-5 down in the second set against Royer, or save 6 match points against Rublev, it reinforces their belief that he's unbeatable. Because even when you're beating him, he finds a way. That's the most demoralizing thing an opponent can experience. The physical component of his game also feeds the psychological advantage. His court coverage is exceptional. Opponents hit what should be winners, and he tracks them down. That's mentally exhausting, because it means you have to hit 2 or 3 extra perfect shots to win the point. And the mental load of knowing you need to be perfect while your opponent just needs to be very good. That asymmetry is psychologically draining over the course of a 2 or 3 hour match. The variety in his game creates a different kind of psychological pressure. Because you can't just prepare for one thing. You have to defend against his power, and his touch, and his net play, and his drop shots, and his defense, and his transition game. That's too many things to defend simultaneously, which creates decision paralysis. Opponents find themselves reacting rather than proacting, because there are too many threats to anticipate. Alcaraz's own comments about continuous improvement add another layer of psychological pressure on his rivals. There is always room for improvement, he said after winning Doha. I still see myself with weaknesses. I try to get better in training, be better in matches. That's terrifying for opponents. Because he's saying, I'm winning everything, and I'm still not at my peak. I'm still getting better. That message to the tour is, this dominance you're experiencing now, it might get worse. The scheduling intelligence Alcaraz has shown in 2026 also contributes to the dominance. He skipped Rotterdam after the Australian Open to rest and recover. He arrived in Doha fresh rather than fatigued. That's veteran-level decision-making from a 22-year-old. And it means opponents are facing him at his physical peak every time, while they might be dealing with accumulated fatigue from playing more tournaments. The mental load on opponents is also compounded by the ranking gap. Alcaraz is now over 3,000 points ahead of Sinner at number 2. That gap has grown significantly over the past months. When you see someone pulling away in the rankings while you're struggling to keep pace, that affects confidence. The external validation of the ranking system reinforces the internal feeling that maybe you really can't beat this guy right now. The historical accomplishment aspect also creates psychological weight. Alcaraz is the youngest man ever to complete the career Grand Slam. He did it at 22. That's historic. That's the kind of milestone that gets mentioned every time he walks on court. Opponents know they're not just facing another good player. They're facing someone who's already achieved things that most Hall of Famers never accomplish. That context adds pressure. The media narrative reinforces the psychological advantage too. Every article about Alcaraz talks about his dominance, his historic achievements, his incredible form. Every article about his opponents talks about how they've lost to him, how they're trying to figure him out, how they're struggling to compete. Those narratives seep into players' consciousness and shape how they see themselves relative to Alcaraz. Social media amplifies it even further. After each Alcaraz victory, highlight reels circulate showing his impossible shots, compilation videos of his best points, analysis of his tactical brilliance. That constant stream of content celebrating his excellence creates an aura that opponents can't escape. Even if they try to avoid social media, their teams see it. Their fans see it. And all of that feeds into the perception that Alcaraz is on a different level. The way other players talk about him also contributes. Phil said, "I'm not at that level at all." Royer said Alcaraz is on another level. Multiple players have used variations of "he's just better" when explaining losses. That consensus among the players themselves, that Alcaraz is operating at a higher level, creates a collective belief that's harder to fight than just your own individual doubts. The intimidation factor is also real. When you watch Alcaraz play, you see shots that seem impossible. Retrieve impossible balls, tracking down drop shots from behind the baseline, hitting winners from defensive positions. That visual evidence of his abilities creates fear. Not the fear of physical harm, but fear of humiliation. Fear of being made to look helpless on court. That fear affects decision-making and shot execution in subtle, but significant ways. The clutch performance aspect is particularly demoralizing for opponents. Alcaraz raises his level on the biggest points. When serving to stay in sets, when saving break points, when facing match points against himself, he gets better, not worse. That's the opposite of what most players do under pressure. And opponents notice. They know that even if they get opportunities, Alcaraz will probably escape. That knowledge makes them play tentatively when opportunities arise. The physical intimidation is also a factor. Alcaraz is explosive. His first step is among the quickest in tennis. His court coverage is exceptional. Opponents know they'll have to run him ragged to have any chance, and running Alcaraz ragged is nearly impossible. That physical superiority means opponents are often tired before he is, which compounds the technical and tactical disadvantages they're already facing. The variety of surfaces Alcaraz dominates also eliminates strategic hope. Some players might think, okay, I can't beat him on hard courts, but maybe on clay. But Alcaraz won the French Open twice. Maybe on grass. He won Wimbledon. There's no surface where opponents can reasonably expect an advantage. That complete surface versatility means there's no escape hatch, no tournament where you can realistically expect to face a diminished version of Alcaraz. The longevity of his dominance is another factor. This isn't a hot streak of a few weeks. He's been at or near the top for years now. He won his first major at 19. He's won 7 majors by 22. This extended excellence means opponents can't just wait for him to cool off. This is his baseline now. This is his normal level. And that realization, that this dominance might be permanent, is psychologically crushing. The coaching dimension also matters. Samuel Lopez has clearly done excellent work with Alcaraz's mental game. The composure under pressure, the ability to find solutions mid-match, the positive self-talk. That's all trained, not innate. And opponents know that Alcaraz has world-class support helping him maintain and extend his advantages. That makes the gap feel even more insurmountable, because it's not just Alcaraz's talent. It's an entire infrastructure designed to maximize that talent. The marketing and commercial success also feeds into psychological dominance. Alcaraz is everywhere. Nike campaigns, Rolex ads. He's the face of tennis in the post-Big Three era. That visibility creates star power that transcends tennis. When you're facing not just a player, but a global brand, that adds psychological weight. You're not just trying to win a tennis match. You're trying to beat an icon. That's a different kind of pressure. The future projections make it even more intimidating. Because Alcaraz is 22. He hasn't reached his physical peak yet. He's still developing. If he's this dominant now, what happens when he reaches his absolute prime at 25 or 26? That question hangs over opponents. They're not just dealing with current Alcaraz. They're anticipating an even better version coming soon. That's demoralizing because it suggests the gap will only widen. The mental health dimension is also worth considering. Because believing you can't beat someone creates genuine psychological distress. It affects sleep before matches. It affects pre-match preparation. It affects how you feel warming up. That anxiety and stress compound over time and can lead to actual performance decreases beyond just tactical decision-making. The mind-body connection means that psychological disadvantage manifests as physical underperformance. The question is whether this psychological advantage can be broken. History suggests yes. Every dominant player eventually loses. Every winning streak ends. The big three all went through periods where they seemed unbeatable. Then someone figured them out, or they hit a rough patch, or injuries intervened. The same will likely happen to Alcaraz at some point. But understanding how psychological advantages get broken is instructive. Because it's rarely about the dominant player suddenly getting worse. It's usually about one opponent finding a way to believe differently, to reframe the matchup in their mind, to convince themselves that this specific day, under these specific circumstances, they can win. That mental reframing is incredibly difficult to achieve, especially when facing someone with Alcaraz's track record. But it's not impossible. Usually, it requires either a massive performance from the underdog, where everything clicks perfectly, or a circumstance where the favorite is compromised, injury, fatigue, distraction, bad conditions that favor the opponent. The most likely candidate to break this psychological hold is probably Jannik Sinner, ironically. Because Sinner has beaten Alcaraz before. He knows it's possible. Even though he's lost 5 straight now, and is openly struggling with his form, Sinner has the historical evidence that he can compete at Alcaraz's level. That's more than most players have. When Sinner gets back to his best form, and he will eventually, that historical success gives him a mental foothold that other players lack. Novak Djokovic is another candidate, but for different reasons. Djokovic has spent 2 decades being the mental assassin himself. He's the one who usually has the psychological edge. Facing someone younger, who's now doing to him what he did to everyone else for years, might actually motivate Djokovic in unique ways. The role reversal could awaken something in him that other competitors can't access. But for the players ranked 3 to 20, breaking free from the perception that Alcaraz is unbeatable is much harder. They don't have the historical success like Sinner. They don't have the championship pedigree like Djokovic. They're operating purely from hope rather than evidence, and hope isn't enough at this level of competition. The role of coaches in addressing this psychological disadvantage is also significant, because a good coach can help reframe how a player thinks about a matchup. They can break down tape to identify specific patterns where Alcaraz is vulnerable. They can create tactical game plans that give the player something concrete to focus on rather than just the abstract fear of facing someone unbeatable. But even the best coaching can't overcome a player's deep-seated belief that they can't win. The player has to buy into the game plan completely. They have to believe that executing these tactics will actually work. And when you've watched Alcaraz destroy those same tactics from other players, that belief is hard to generate. The pressure of expectation on Alcaraz himself is also worth considering. Because saying, "Many of my rivals see me as unbeatable," creates massive pressure on him to maintain that perception. If he loses now, especially to someone ranked outside the top 10, it doesn't just end his winning streak. It potentially shatters the psychological advantage he's built. That's enormous pressure, and how Alcaraz handles it when he inevitably faces adversity will reveal whether this psychological edge is sustainable long-term. There's also the question of whether Alcaraz actually believes he's unbeatable, or if he's just recognizing the psychological dynamic without internalizing it himself. The difference matters. If he thinks he's unbeatable, that breeds complacency. If he thinks others think he's unbeatable, while he himself maintains healthy self-doubt and hunger, that's the sweet spot that allows sustained excellence. Based on his other comments, there is always room for improvement. I still see myself with weaknesses. It seems like Alcaraz is in the latter category. He's acknowledging the psychological advantage he has over rivals while maintaining personal humility about his own game. That balance is sophisticated and suggests the advantage might be sustainable because it's not breeding the arrogance that usually precedes a fall from dominance. The physical toll of maintaining this level is another factor that could affect the psychological dynamic. Tennis is brutally demanding physically. Playing every match at maximum intensity, carrying the pressure of being unbeaten, dealing with the mental load of being expected to win every time, that accumulates. If Alcaraz starts showing signs of fatigue or injury, the perception of invincibility will crack quickly. That's why his scheduling decisions are so important. Skipping Rotterdam was smart. Taking time to rest and recover rather than grinding every tournament maintains the physical freshness that supports the dominant performances that maintain the psychological edge. If he can manage his schedule intelligently, he might sustain this longer than rivals expect. The commercial implications of being perceived as unbeatable are also significant. Sponsors want to be associated with dominance. Winning streaks create narratives that sell products. Alcaraz's marketability is through the roof right now precisely because he's on this incredible run. That creates financial incentives to maintain the winning streak and the psychological advantage that comes with it. But those commercial pressures can also create problems. If Alcaraz starts feeling like he has to win for his sponsors, for his endorsement deals, for his public image, rather than just for his own competitive satisfaction, that's when pressure becomes problematic. That's when the psychological advantage can flip and become a psychological burden. The media's role in sustaining or undermining this psychological advantage is also crucial. Every time a headline calls Alcaraz unbeatable or unstoppable, that reinforces the perception among his rivals. But if media starts questioning him, analyzing his weaknesses, suggesting vulnerabilities, pointing out close calls, that gives rivals permission to believe he's beatable after all. Right now, the media narrative is overwhelmingly positive. Alcaraz is being framed as historic, dominant, potentially the greatest player of his generation. That narrative supports the psychological advantage. But narratives can shift quickly in sports media. One bad loss, one injury, one controversial moment, and suddenly the narrative becomes, is Alcaraz vulnerable? That narrative shift can change psychological dynamics rapidly. The fan element is also interesting, because Alcaraz has cultivated a massive following who show up to matches expecting him to win. That crowd energy can be intimidating for opponents. Walking into an arena where 15,000 people assume you're going to lose, that's another psychological weight to carry. The crowd noise after Alcaraz winners, the groans when opponents get ahead, the palpable expectation of victory, all of that feeds into the psychological advantage. The statistical analysis of clutch performance is particularly relevant here, because Alcaraz's ability to raise his level on the biggest points is what makes the psychological advantage so powerful. It's not just that he's winning, it's that he's winning the points that matter most. Opponents notice this pattern. They see it in match data. They experience it firsthand. And it reinforces the belief that even when they're playing well, even when they're creating opportunities, Alcaraz will find a way. That clutch gene, the ability to perform best when pressure is highest, is partly innate but also partly trained. Sports psychologists work on visualization, breathing techniques, mental frameworks for pressure situations. Alcaraz clearly has either natural clutch ability or has trained it to elite levels. And opponents know this, which makes them tentative in crucial moments, because they're anticipating Alcaraz will clutch up. The comparison to other sports is also instructive. In basketball, Michael Jordan created similar psychological advantages. Opponents would give up in the fourth quarter because they knew Jordan would take over. In soccer, Lionel Messi creates situations where defenders don't even try to stop him aggressively because they assume he'll dribble past them anyway. That learned helplessness in the face of excellence is what Alcaraz is describing in tennis. But those psychological advantages were built over years, not months. Jordan spent a decade establishing his clutch reputation. Messi built his over 15+ years. Alcaraz is building this advantage incredibly quickly. He's only 22 and already has rivals believing he's unbeatable. That accelerated timeline suggests either exceptional talent or exceptional psychological acuity, or both. The question of sustainability becomes even more important given that accelerated timeline. Can Alcaraz maintain this psychological edge for the next decade? Or will the early establishment of dominance create a target that rivals will specifically train to overcome? History suggests the latter is more likely. Early dominance often creates focused opposition that finds ways to adapt. But Alcaraz seems aware of this dynamic. His comments about always trying to improve, about seeing weaknesses in his own game, suggest he's not resting on current dominance. He's anticipating that rivals will adapt, and he needs to keep evolving to stay ahead. That forward-thinking approach is what sustained the Big Three for so long. They never stopped improving even when they were dominating. The injury factor remains the biggest wild card, because no psychological advantage survives serious injury. If Alcaraz has to take significant time off, the aura of invincibility will fade. Rivals will remember he's human. The winning streaks will end. And when he returns, he'll have to rebuild the psychological advantage from scratch. That's why his physical training and recovery protocols are so important. Staying healthy isn't just about being able to compete. It's about maintaining the psychological edge that comes from constant presence and consistent dominance. Every tournament Alcaraz plays and wins reinforces the psychological advantage. Every tournament he misses gives rivals hope. But right now, in February 2026, with Alcaraz at 12-0 and looking utterly dominant, the psychological edge he's describing is very real. And by acknowledging it openly, by saying, it's possible that many of my rivals see me as unbeatable, he's actually strengthening that edge. Because now those rivals have to confront their own beliefs. Do they see him as unbeatable? If so, how do they change that? And just asking those questions creates more mental clutter. That's master-level psychology from someone barely old enough to rent a car. And it's why Alcaraz isn't just winning matches. He's winning the mental battle before the physical competition even starts. What do you think? Do opponents really see Alcaraz as unbeatable right now? Or is this just confidence from a player on a hot streak? Can this psychological advantage last? Or will someone break through and shatter the aura? And who's the most likely to do it? Sinner, Djokovic, or someone else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more analysis of the mental game at the top of tennis, hit that subscribe button. We're covering every angle of Alcaraz's dominance,